Okay, let's take a look at how you navigate through MaxTheTest.com. First of all, you always have to log in. Nothing new. It's the same with all kinds of web pages. In this case, the first time you log in, it's better not to log in right here. But once you've logged in once, it will be saved, your email address, your username, or your password right there. So it's easier to log in from here in the future. But for the first time, I want you to go over here to the video course, hit login right there. What will happen is you'll see this page. These will be blanks. And so you put your username and your password here and click login. Now, the very first time you do this, it's a good idea to click on Remember Me, and then that'll always be available in the future so that when you go to the website, it's right there. You don't have to put in username or passwords. And of course, right down here is your safety net so that if you forget your password, you can always go there and create a new one. Now, having done all that, we're going to log in and go directly to the course. The course will, in fact, have uh, quite a list of chapters over here on the left, starting with introduction to the course, which is this page. But then you'll see a listing of 12 chapters. Each one of those chapters is broken down into lessons. So here you can see the first chapter has all the introductory stuff in it that we'll be talking about at the workshop next week. Then what you can do from there is just see that if you close that, you can go to here. Here's reading, give you an example. Here are all the lessons for reading. Just to give you another example, we can jump down here, take a look at a math chapter. This is the first chapter in math that handles all of the review material that you'll need and introductory math concepts, pre-algebra issues primarily. And you can see that they're all right there for you. Now I'm going to close this up since you've seen that. I'm going to go back to the introduction because that's really where it all starts. So you click here, you go to the welcome screen to the Wizard's Workshop, and it gives you a little background on what the program's all about. And you can click on chapter 1. That'll take you directly to chapter 1. Or you could just go over here and start like we did with the drop down before. Before we do that, I'd like to point out that as you go through this demonstration, multiple times you're going to see edit. That will not show up on your screen. I'm running this as the administrator, so I'm allowed to go in and edit things, but you won't be able to do that, of course. So you won't be seeing the edit. So let's just go ahead over here to chapter 1 and click on that introduction. Now, every chapter has the word introduction right after the chapter name like this, and you'll always click on that because that will take you to an introductory page for that chapter. They're usually a lot shorter than this, but because this is the introduction to the introduction, there's a lot more information here than normal. What is common to all the introductions to each chapter is that down near the bottom of the page, you will see a PDF file that you can click on that will print for you a section of a chapter of a large book. The book is about a total of 250 pages, and the students will print their chapter one by one as they go through the program, so that they need a 3-ring binder that they can put all the materials in. And we refer to that as the Demystifying SAT and ACT Student Manual. So they will have to print that. Let's take a quick look at what each one will look like. They'll each start with a table of contents for that chapter and all of the lessons. And over here on the left, you'll see the lesson numbers. Those lesson numbers correspond to the drop down that we saw in the initial page when we went to the class. So these are lessons 100 through 115, and notice they'll be on pages 1 through 6. Once in a while, you'll see a video that has only a video. It has nothing printed from the manual. So that's all laid out for you. And when you come to one of these, your students certainly should be printing these for their use while they're watching the videos. So we're back here. Let me show you, for example, another chapter real quickly. Here's chapter 5. That's that introductory to math with all the analyzing data and solving problems issues. You can see again, you click there. Down here is that chapter's PDF printout. We'll click on that. You see the same format. Now we're in chapter the 500s. And again, you see page numbers over to the right. And notice that the numbering for the pages starts anew each time you go to a new chapter. That's because I decided when I was creating the book that if I needed to add stuff to the materials, new practice questions, it would be a lot easier to repaginate just one chapter rather than, let's say, from chapter 5, if I change the number here, I'd have to go all the way back to the beginning of the book. And it just seemed to be that would be way too cumbersome. Now, when you go through, just to give you a little preview, what you will see is that each lesson also has the corresponding number on it. So this is data display types. It's lesson 501. And as you go down through here, you see practice questions that we've written. We'll go through the more detailed this during your training. There are the answer key for those questions. And then below that, you will see that we have selected certain questions from actual ACT and SAT books that correspond to data displays in this situation. But as you go on to other lessons, of course, those questions that we've selected out of the books will be consistent with what those chapters and lessons are all about. All right, so let's go from here back to where we started and take a look at the introduction. So here we are here again, just so you can see where we are. We're back at the very beginning. You can see again that there's chapter 1. This time I'm going to enter it from here. That opens up chapter 1. Here's the introduction to chapter 1 where we started before. And we're going to slide down here, and the last little bit of the video we talked about this introduction. Now let's take a look at the table of contents, which is the very first thing that students should print out and put in their binders. Here you get your first close-up look at the wizard, kind of introduction to the book itself, copyright information, and then here's the table of contents for the entire program. And now you can get to see something additional that's very valuable. So, and again, in addition to the video numbers and the titles and the page numbers throughout the book, you can look over here and you see video time. That's exactly what it suggests. This is how long each video is. So you can see that most videos are fairly short. This gives you a time so that maybe you're going to use these as seat work when you start your class. That's one way they can be used. How we use them, because we don't have a classroom, we have a course, but it isn't conducted in a school setting, so we don't have to take attendance and the other things you do at the beginning of your class. But if you wanted to use it for that, you could know, okay, this first video is Meet the Alexanders. It's about 3 minutes long, and you could do that one so that they can see who their instructors are on the videos. You could be showing them the video on SAT and ACT or games and do that. We'll look at that in a few minutes as the actual video for a demonstration, and so on. So you could use it for that. You could give homework assignments. So you could look at this and you could say, aha, I'll give the kids 15 minutes or a half hour worth of videos to watch. And now I want you to keep in mind something. This is how long those videos last if you were watching them as a TV program or as a movie. They are not that short when you're actually doing the work. And you're going to see some of the reasons why that's true. So this 3 minute and 23-second video might take as long as 6 or 8 minutes. It might double it. Some might even more than double it as students go through and do word problems in the math section or whatever. But this is a good indicator of how much time it'll take the kids to get through that. And then as you go down, you can see it's a standard table of contents, same format. Here you have, again, the numbers for the lessons. You can see the book that chapter 2's reading and the editing tests. We call those the editing tests because they have different names on both the SAT and the ACT. So we just collapse them and call editing because the same content is basically the same on both tests. So let's now hop back to chapter 1 again. I want to show you something here that's very important for the layout and understanding how the program works. Here we have one of the lessons. This is 101. And this lesson is incredibly important because it sets up the entire program because we teach this whole attack on the SATs and ACTs as if it were a game. We want the students to understand that to get their score up, raising your score is as much about understanding how test writers write questions that cause you to make silly mistakes or not understand them in a word problem situation. And the more we can get the students in the heads of the test writers, the better their scores will do. So let's just take a look. And I think because I recorded this, for some reason, the actual audio that you're going to hear as I speak does not get recorded. That was quite a surprise. So I'm actually trying to redo this particular activity because it's not going to be like you think. So let's talk about adjusting your headset, just like I said. But what I want to do is show you that each lesson has a video and it has what we call a wizard review. When you first look at it, it's going to look like a quiz, but it isn't a quiz. It's something different from that. Some people call them knowledge checkers because what I wanted to do through these wizard reviews was automate the note-taking process for the student. And I wanted to direct them to make sure that they took notes about certain things and ended up with a complete set of notes for the class. So how I did that was I created these quizzes and called Wizard Reviews. And let me show you how they work because a student must get the question correct before they can go to the following question. So let's kind of get started with that. First of all, you can see that there could be some fill in blank questions. In fact, there are a few of those, not very many. Most of them are multiple choice and true and false. So here, the way the student starts is they boot up the video, then they go to the first question to see what it is that I thought was the very important thing for them to have in their notes. So now they go over and watch the video. I'm going to assume for a minute that you could not hear what I'm saying because right at that point, I tell the students that they need to approach the test as games. And so they're back over here now. They type in the word games. Okay, they move on. This is feedback. Every question, whether they get it right or wrong, has some personal feedback that I've written in response to their answers. And if they're wrong, it directs them back to the question so that they can get it right. Because until they get this question correct, they're not allowed to go to the next question. So that when they're through with all of the questions and they've got all the answers correct, you're going to see that they're going to get a printout with that information. I'll show you that in just a few seconds. This is a very peculiar question because it's the only one out of 123 where I've had the students write something in their manual before they can proceed with the lesson. And you can see that what I wanted them to do was to write down the name of a game that they play, because after all, we're developing the analogy between taking the SAT or the ACT and playing a game. So they write that down, and then they go back here to find the answers to this question. So they click here, they begin again, and I start talking about, and I'll stop this right here so you can see that. That chart's also one of the papers that are pages that's in their book for chapter 1, where they actually write down the name of a game. And then what they do is we start writing down characteristics, and I talk about that. They can add more characteristics. It's a fun thing to do in a classroom, is to start talking about what makes a game a game. And of course, games have opponents, they have rules, they have strategies, and games have outcomes or consequences. So the student can answer all of those. Of course, it's all of the above. And there are other things too that they will have put on that sheet. So now they click and go on to the next question. And here it says, who is your opponent in this game? Well, I give them the answer to that question. But if you're doing this live with a bunch of kids in a classroom, it's really fascinating to ask them who their opponents are. Some will say, it's yourself. You're competing against yourself because you're trying to do better. No, that's not the case. Because opponents try to hinder your progress. You're not trying to hinder your own progress, so you're not an opponent. They think you're competing with other test takers. No, that's not true either. You're actually competing against the test writer. So that's the person that creates the impediments and the challenges that you need to overcome, just like if you were playing a sport or checkers. So they go down here. Then the next question is, when playing a game, it doesn't matter how well you understand your opponent's strategy, strengths, and weaknesses. Obviously, that's false. You do need to know that. The more you understand your opponent, the better you're going to do. So the better you understand the test maker, the better you're going to do on the test. So let's just see what happens if they get this question wrong. They go down here, and I give them some feedback about that. And I try to be fun once in a while. If you miss this, playing more games would help you understand. Would you like to play some high stakes poker? Obviously, they don't understand. Watching your opponent, they're not going to win very much money. So then I ask them to go back, try it again. They go back, they change their answer. Then it says, yep, you're right. This particular answer is very long. And so it's one of the few that bleeds over to the bottom. They'll have to scroll down, read the response, hit continue. Now, this particular page, it's important for us to stop and talk about, but by the time your kids get their hands on this, these pages will probably be gone. But I want you to see what happens here. This is going to be automated because when your students are registered for the website and they log in, they're going to have the same email address for their registration and what they put in here. So that we've got a program that I just got back from my webmaster today, that if it works the way it's supposed to, that when a student logs in, the computer knows who's there and will fill this in automatically. But I'm going to stop here and talk about what happens. There's two very important things that happen here. One is when a student is finished with the last question, they're going to get an email that has all of the questions that we just answered, all of the right answers on it, and it's going to be sent to them automatically. That becomes their notes for the class. Not so important for this particular lesson, but as when we get into reading and math and the science test, that will become very, very important because I'm asking questions about all the key things that are said on the videos. So now the student gets that. They will not get wrong answers, and they will not get my feedback for the right and wrong answers. They simply get an email with the questions and the proper answers to each question. The second piece of what happens here that's very important for you as teachers is that when a student completes a wizard review, their email address is then entered into a Google Sheet. It's basically Excel, but it's Google's version of that. Their email will be included in an Excel spreadsheet for this particular lesson. So when they've completed this uh, Google review, we now know that bob@gmail.com has done this review. Then what we're creating, and I'm getting some help from some staff there at the school, is that you will have a grade book, basically a spreadsheet with all your students' names on it. And that spreadsheet will be arranged so that it'll have a student's name, and then it'll have all the numbers for all the videos that the student is supposed to watch. And it will read these individual spreadsheets to see which email addresses match between your classroom and the ones that are on the individual sheets, and it'll make an entry into your grade book so that you'll be able to track the videos that the students have watched and have completed the wizard reviews. So that's the way everything works. Now, I want to go back and do one thing for you, because when you come to class next week, there's something that I want you to have taken care of, and that's I want you to be sure that going back and looking at the table of contents, that you've printed that out, because a major activity next week when we do this training, as I recall, it's Wednesday, but it may be Tuesday, I can't quite remember, is that we're going to go through this table of contents and we're going to decide where in your curriculum, where in your scope and sequence are these different things going to be taught. We're in the editing chapter right now, so I expect that'll probably end up in English classes. We look down here, but we've got math classes, and look at this, and you may decide where these different topics are going to be taught. And there certainly can be some overlap. There's nothing unique about them. But for example, I look down here at probability. When I was a biology teacher and we talked about genetics and dominant and recessive traits, I taught probability. So this lesson could be taught in a math class, it could be taught in a science class, and the whole business of data analysis could be spread around. So I'm just wanting you to know that what we're going to be doing during the workshop is figuring out where the pieces fit. So it'd be really valuable for you to print this out, take a look, see which ones might fit into your classroom, into your existing curriculum, to help supplement what you're already doing and help the kids with their ACT scores at the same time. So welcome aboard. Enjoyed providing this video for you. And I hope that we have an exciting time, because we've seen some great results up at Upperman. And I know Mr. Wilson is excited to see those kinds of results there at White High School. So I'll see you next week, and have a great weekend. Get off to a good start. See you soon. Bye-bye.